Well, I'm back again. I think what I'm going to do, I've decided, because a couple weeks ago I finished reading through the three forms of unity, which consists of the Heidelberg Catechism from 1563, the Belgic Confession of Faith from 1561, and the Canons of Dort from 1619. And while I had a couple questions that I need to ask a Presbyterian person about the first two of those documents, the Canons of Dort are a document that I've wanted to read for the past at least 7 years, and I finally got around to it a couple weeks ago. I wish I'd read it sooner. What the Canons of Dort are is, if you've ever heard of Calvinism, and I think it would be better called Dortism because of the Canons of Dort. Calvinism, what Calvin taught, there was a lot more than just the 5 points. And he doesn't even really ever have a place where he just talks about the 5 points all by themselves. They're interspersed throughout all his writings. But the Synod of Dort met to, and I quote from the book Christian Confessions, Canons of Dort was because of the Synod of Dordrecht, was held in view of the serious disturbance in the Reformed Church by the rise and spread of Arminianism. Arminius, a theological professor at the University of Leiden, or Leiden, not sure how you pronounce it, it's Leyden, departed from the Reformed faith in his teaching concerning 5 important points. He taught conditional election on the ground of foreseen faith, universal atonement, partial depravity, resistible grace, and the possibility of a lapse from grace. These views were rejected by the Synod, and the opposite views were embodied in what is now called the Canons of Dort, or the 5 Articles against the Remonstrants. In these canons, the Synod set forth the Reformed doctrine on these points, namely, unconditional election, limited atonement, total depravity, irresistible grace, and the perseverance of the saints. So what I want to do, because I read these, and in the course of my life of holding to the 5 points of Calvinism, TULIP, if you want to call it that, though the Canons of Dort would organize it as ULTIP, ULTIP, instead of TULIP. In my life of holding to these views, I have either met people that say Calvinists teach terrible doctrine and you shouldn't be one of them because they teach all these things that are terrible, like God predestines people to hell and different things like that. I've also, on the other side of the spectrum, met people who call themselves Calvinists but don't know what they're talking about. And so, as I was reading through this document, I was thinking, everybody that calls himself a Calvinist should be required to read this before they talk about being a Calvinist. So what I want to do, on every Wednesday for the next however long it takes, is take one paragraph of this document, read it, read the verses that it quotes from or links to, and then make a couple comments on it. So these videos should be no longer than 10 minutes, if that. So, the first head of doctrine is divine election and reprobation. The first article says, all mankind is condemned before God. And it reads in full, as all men have sinned in Adam, lie under the curse, and are deserving of eternal death, God would have done no injustice by leaving them all to perish and delivering them over to condemnation on account of sin. According to the words of the apostle, quote, that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may be brought under the judgment of God. Romans 3:19. And for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23. And for the wages of sin is death. Romans 6:23. So it starts out by saying, as all men have sinned in Adam. And there's a note there that says Romans 5:12. So what does it mean when this document quotes and says all men sinned in Adam? Paul writes in Romans 5:12, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, in this way death spread to all men because all sinned." Simply put, Adam sinned. He was our representative. So because he sinned, everybody that comes from him is a sinner. But not just that. You grow up in this world, you will eventually sin. You were born in sin, you will eventually choose to sin of your own volition. You'll say, that looks fun, I don't want to do what God says, and I'm going to sin. All you have to do is look at Romans 1 to see it, but I will say, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that right now, because this isn't about total depravity, this is about election. So the first article is just saying, we need help. Here's why we need help. And then the rest of the articles under this first head, this divine election, are going to explain why we need to be elected, why we need God to do the stuff that needs to be done so that we can be saved. He goes on, as all men have sinned in Adam, lie under the curse, and are deserving of eternal death. Note 2, Romans 6:23, where Paul writes, for the wages of sin is death, because wages are payment earned for working. You work sin, you earn death. Now it goes on, but we haven't gotten there yet, so I'm not going to read the rest of Romans 6:23. He also says, God would have done no injustice by leaving them all to perish and delivering them over to condemnation on account of sin. So essentially, and they quote Ephesians 2:1-3 on this part, so I'll read that. Keeping in mind as we read this, that the people writing this document are arguing God could have left us in sin and been perfectly just to do it. And here's why. You were dead in your trespasses and sins in which you previously walked, according to this worldly age, according to the ruler of the atmospheric domain, the spirit now working in the disobedient. We too all previously lived among them in our fleshly desires, carrying out the inclinations of our flesh and thoughts, and by nature we were children under wrath, as the others were also. So, to make a long story short, we're sinners. We deserve death. We deserve hell. We've done nothing good to deserve anything but that. I would go on and I would argue Isaiah 64:6 says, even our righteous deeds are filthy rags in God's sight. We are dirty. We are sinful. We are wicked. We can't offer God anything that he would go, oh, I didn't know about that. So you do deserve to come into heaven. It's never going to happen. We are sinners. We sin by nature. We deserve the wrath of God. These are called the doctrines of grace for a reason, because as it will continue to lay out, all of our salvation is sola gratia, by grace alone. But you have to wait till next week to get the second article. As all men have sinned in Adam, I'll read it again, they lie under the curse and are deserving of eternal death. God would have done no injustice by leaving them all to perish and delivering them over to condemnation on account of sin, according to the words of the apostle, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may be brought under the judgment of God, Romans 3:19. And, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. And, for the wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23. Weeks and weeks and weeks from now, we will eventually get to the third head of doctrine, which is the corruption of man, and we will learn just how bad our plight is because of sin. But the way this is organized by time. So unconditional election happens in eternity past. Christ came 2,000 years ago and died. We are sinful in the present, or our past if we've been saved. Then we are drawn by irresistible grace at some point in our past, and then the rest of our life is perseverance. So, with that, Soli Deo Gloria. Hope you enjoyed. Look forward to seeing you next time.